Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, Paris is waging a war on cars.
100% of the capital streets will be bike-friendly.
So can the French capital keep the momentum without losing the public? I'm Natacha Del Toro, and this is The Take.
I would say that biking around Paris is one of life's pleasures. I mean, it's fabulous and you know, tree-lined along the banks of the River Seine. My personal commute, I go past the Eiffel Tower because I actually don't live too far from it. I go along the river, past the Louvre. I mean, it's tremendous. I'm so lucky to live in a city like this, and exploring it on a bike like any city, many cities actually, is one of the best ways to do it. And it's one of the fastest because you're going to beat the traffic, you're not stuck in the metro, and you've got your own freedom. So, I mean, I really love biking, and I always have. So I'm Natacha Butler. I am Paris correspondent for Al Jazeera English, and I'm based in Paris, where I've lived for, well, more than 20 years.
You're making me so jealous. Being in the U.S., I mean, like, these are car cities, right? Not always do they have safe lanes for bikers. As I was researching for this story, I was actually surprised to learn that more people in Paris now use their bikes than cars, which, you know, I just never thought that would be the case in Paris. You know, I was actually in Paris in the 90s, and it was a glorious summer. But back then, Natacha, it was also one of the most polluted traffic clogged cities. So there's this independent group that tracks air quality in Paris called Air Paris, and they've produced maps of air pollution in the city over the years, dating from 2007 to 2024. So maybe around the time that you moved to Paris that they started doing these maps. Virtually every neighborhood was in red in 2007, which indicated a very high level of air pollution. You know, on smoggy days, I understand you could barely see the Eiffel Tower. Now, you're on the ground there. Have you noticed a difference in the air quality?
Look, 20 years ago, when I moved to Paris, the office for Al Jazeera is actually in a very high skyscraper, one of the only ones in central Paris. And you used to look out over the cityscape, and you would see this thick black line of smog, and it was so noticeable. And you just don't see that anymore. You really don't see that anymore, and it's something that we've all noticed. You don't feel it either. You don't feel like you're breathing in pollution like you used to. And as a biker, as somebody who has biked for 20 years, I know that when I first arrived, I used to be on the roads, and quite often it wouldn't necessarily be pleasant because there was so much pollution, so much traffic, car traffic, and it's definitely a different experience. I'm not saying the air is clean, but it's definitely much more pleasant, and you do breathe more easily.
I'm sure, yeah. I know that the city must have gotten healthier because when you have such high concentrations of car emissions, this is going to increase, heart attacks, lung cancer, bronchitis, asthma. So it seems like this has been a very positive change then that probably has also improved the air quality, but also probably made people quite a bit healthier.
Yes, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I know that one of the aims of the city council when they started looking at ways they could make Paris greener and cleaner for the future generations, one of the concerns was health, because the health of people is obviously going to be impacted if they're living in a polluted city. And there's no doubt that that's had a positive impact on people's lives.
Right. The mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, said that 2,500 people die in the city every year because of air pollution. I mean, she's really one of the people that's pushed for this great change, you know, making like fewer cars, having more bike lanes, improving air quality. Natacha, what measures has Hidalgo put in place?
Yeah, I mean, making Paris a greener city has certainly been one of Anne Hidalgo's main aims in office. She wants to make it her thing. She likes to go around the world and talk to mayors in other cities about what they can do to make their city greener. So the sort of things that she's put in place in the last few years are, I mean, one of the main things are the bike lanes. Over 1,000 kilometers worth of bike lanes in the city, which is pretty remarkable. She has has increased the number of green spaces. She wants the city to have 50% of green spaces by 2050. She wants to reduce local emissions by 100%. So she's put in all these different measures in order to try and make Paris a real kind of global leader when it comes to urban living in a greener and cleaner way.
And, you know, we don't always think about how much urban planning and policy shape the way that we move through a city. I am talking to you right now from Los Angeles, which is famous for gridlock and for poor public transportation. This was a city that was largely built after World War II, which you see a lot of cities in the United States are. So they're built around the car. But surprisingly, when talking about LA, something that I don't think people know as much is it once had the largest streetcar network in the United States. I know that Paris has changed a lot, too, in recent years. It wasn't always this big biking city. So, Natacha, maybe you could tell me, when did this shift to a greener city begin?
Yeah, I'll certainly pick up on that. And funnily enough, I actually used to live in Los Angeles for a few years. And I remember
did? Oh, so you know the traffic
Yeah, but
here.
I remember somebody coming from Europe, how shocked I was that you needed to take a car to go everywhere. Even to go and get some milk, I had to take the car. I mean, maybe it's changed, but I remember finding that so different culturally. It was such a different way to lead your life. So, of course, it wasn't always a biking city in Paris. And I think there were two main points where things really changed. The first was at the end of 2019, when there were, seemingly unlinked to our topic, huge pension protests. People were really angry about pension reform that the government wanted to push through.
Nationwide strikes have France at a standstill. Millions of workers have taken to the streets to protest a controversial pension plan.
And there were lots of strikes, and some of the strikers were transportation workers. So suddenly you're in a city where there were no metros, no trains, the buses weren't working, and everyone had to walk. And it was this incredible time, actually, because it was a few weeks where suddenly you really had to walk everywhere in the city. I'd be walking for like an hour and a half to the other side of the city to go and do something, and it became every day. Suddenly everybody's in the street. And that was a time as well. A lot of people decided to buy a bicycle. There were lots of stories and news reports about, shops running out of bikes because suddenly everybody's trying to buy a bicycle. So that was a real point where people started to go, okay, hang on, we're so fed up of all these transport strikes, we need alternative transportation. But you still had a problem that there were no real bike lanes. But then COVID struck.
Lifted and Parisians returned to their offices, many have shunned the bus and the metro in favour of two wheels. Cycle lanes have never been so busy. New cycle lanes are also being introduced. Rue Rivoli, one of the capital's central arteries and normally bustling with traffic, is now entirely reserved for cyclists.
With COVID, the city of Paris decided to turn a whole bunch of roads into what they called corona lanes, basically bike lanes, cutting traffic, and they did that all across the city. And suddenly it made it much easier for people on bikes to get around. And the idea was that if people are on bikes, they're obviously not coming into contact with each other in public transport, and it was going to be healthier and safer for all of us to be outdoors. And after COVID, after the pandemic, the city of Paris decided basically to keep most of these bike lanes. You've now got about 1,000 kilometres worth of bike lanes across the city as a result. Most of them pretty safe with proper demarcations. And it's really transformed the city because in those last, so 2019, so what are we talking? 6-7 years, you have just seen 6 years, you've seen a city go from a few bikers to suddenly now like a situation where, as you describe, you are often seeing more people on bikes than in cars in Paris. And it's remarkable.
After the break, we hear from an insider on Paris's biking revolution. Is anyone staying behind? The transformation in Paris has many actors to share the credit beyond the city government. We spoke to Daniel Grajales. He's a member of Paris en Selle, or Paris in the Saddle.
I'm a volunteer in the association, and Paris en Selle is the largest cycling association in Paris and the Paris region. We've been active for over 10 years. I've been living in Paris for over 7 years now. And I've always had an interest for cycling, but when I moved to Paris, it kind of moved to the next level.
He says the biking revolution started off in the corridors of City Hall with the idea of a bike network.
And even in the maps, it was very similar to a metro network. So that includes a notion of continuity. So basically, if you build a bicycle lane here, what are you connecting it to? And that creates first an expectation, like if you build a new bicycle lane here, then you have to build one in the street after, and then in the street after. It increases the feeling of safety for cyclists.
But despite the huge strides made, the transformation is not complete.
We don't have a full network yet. There are still parts of the network that are unbuilt. Therefore, if you don't know the city well, you can still find unpleasant surprises. You can be in a beautiful bicycle lane, 100 meters later, be in the middle of very heavy traffic. So it's still a project in the making. We're not Amsterdam yet, we're not Copenhagen yet, but if you compare to where we were 10 years ago, the transformation has been incredible.
And now Parisians have started leading the way forward, starting at the ground level.
We started noticing that they were falling behind in the actual application of the projects. Our primary line of work is tracking what is happening in the city and kind of bringing attention to where further work is needed. And also in informing citizens about what is the current state of cycling infrastructure. We also participate on public meetings where, for example, we discuss technical issues such as like what is the appropriate size for a bicycle lane? Should it be unidirectional? Should it be bidirectional? What kind of traffic lights should you implement for bicycles? How to avoid the conflicts between pedestrians and bicycles? How to better manage cars turning to the left or to the right?
Part of what Paris and Selle has observed is how these changes are made. First, this bicycle revolution is more visible within Paris proper than in the suburbs. And within the city, it has not happened evenly.
First, there is a strong east-west divide. The east is traditionally the more working class part of Paris. That part has moved much faster. There are more bicycle lanes, there is less space devoted to cars, there are more green spaces being created. And the West traditionally has been a much more privileged, a much wealthier part of Paris, where the urban transformation has happened really slowly or simply not happened at all. They are more reticent, but in practice what is happening at the moment is that the demand for cycling infrastructure is so overwhelming that even some of the neighborhoods that didn't want to move before, they are kind of being overwhelmed by the demand.
Regardless of these issues, the numbers behind the transformation have been sweeping.
At the moment, in Paris, cycling takes up around 11% of all trips within Paris, while cars only take around 4%. This means that there are more than double the number of trips by bike than by car within Paris per day. That first shows that there is a lot of enthusiasm about cycling and about there is a real perception of safety in using bicycles as a mode of transportation.
And just like any major change, not everyone's thrilled about it.
I think that any time that you start to have a large-scale urban transformation and every time you discuss something as sensitive as the sharing of public space, you're going to have a pushback. Of course, such a large-scale urban transformation in such a short time frame, because it's really been within a framework of less than 10 years, it does create pushback. Some drivers understand what is happening, and some drivers, I think, understand that even if they choose to use the car, they should not have all of the space devoted to them. But there are some drivers that certainly do not understand and do not take it kindly to have some of the public space removed to them. In any case, I think that for the citizen initiatives such as ours, it's been very clear to say there is no discussion about removing cars out of Paris. Like, that's not really a realistic objective. It's just a matter of rebalancing public space for public to have, for cars to have a fair amount of space devoted to them, but allowing other modes of transportation to also take public space and to be done in a safe and comfortable way.
As Daniel says, This is not just about making Paris bike-friendly. It's about transforming public space for everyone. And the city hall is trying to get citizens involved. During Anne Hidalgo's second term as Paris mayor, there have been 3 referendums in the city. The first one was about whether to allow free-floating scooters, the ones you can just pick up anywhere in the street using an app.
This had become an issue in the city because there were no dedicated parking spaces for them, so they would often be left on the sidewalks. They would be uncomfortable for pedestrians.
The second one was about the price of parking for SUVs. If a pedestrian or a cyclist is struck by this type of supersized vehicle, they'll be 44% more likely to get killed than if hit by a passenger car. So Paris wanted to reduce SUV presence in the city. And then there was a third referendum, this time about creating 500 new so-called garden streets.
So basically continuing their policy of removing the space of cars and increasing the amount of green spaces.
All of it spelling a new era for commuters, like our correspondent Natacha, to find a new way to enjoy their city.
It would be hard not to have a love affair with Paris. It's a city that's international, but is still on a human scale. It's a place where you can walk to your shops, where your kids can go to a school on foot. And biking obviously makes it 100 times better because biking is fun anyway. So if you're kind of gliding around the city and looking at these wonderful monuments as you go by and sort of, throwing your bike and locking it up in front of a cafe, what is there not to like?
And that's The Take. We're always listening to what you think of the show, so let us know what kind of episodes you'd like to hear more of and what you thought of this one. And if you want to catch more episodes like this, make sure you're following our YouTube playlist. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button so you stay in the loop with all things Al Jazeera English. We'll be back.